Hey, this is Laurence Guy, and I'm going to be breaking down my remix of Model Man's amazing Take Me There. Cool, so when I start a remix, I generally take a listen to the stems first and figure out which bits I want to be the focus of the main track and also the focus of the intro. Um, so for me, in the intro, the main thing I wanted to use was this choir vox here. And this really interesting melodic piano stem. So I basically just drag a load of audio into Ableton to set up the intro. So here I've got that one particular sound I was talking about. I kind of have that repeating and repeating, and then I'll have different copies of the same sound. Some of them will be pitched up by 12 semitones, some of them pitched down by 12, some of them reversed, some of them with massive reverbs. Basically just all of this audio you can see here is manipulated in different ways and then kind of merged together to create a sort of abstract intro to the song. So for instance, the piano that I used, I pitched it right down. That kind of became a sort of loop for the intro, and then you start layering other bits on top. Little changes like this. So this one's pitched down, that one's pitched up. You get the idea. It's just lots of manipulated audio layered on top of itself and then affected to create a sort of weird, I don't know, mega intro with all the different parts of those two stems. And I just do that starting on the one, going across, doing it as I'm listening, quickly reversing stuff, quickly pitching stuff up, quickly pitching it down, and then just really do that without any kind of sense until it sounds good. And then that basically creates the intro. And then I stuck the drums underneath just to make sure that it wasn't too lofty. For the intro, I'll just have like maybe one part of the whole drum sound. So in the drums, there's loads of different layers, but in the intro, I'll just choose probably the most sort of simple break that's part of that. So for this, I just use this one here. It's basically just to give the intro some movement. It's not really to kind of have drums in there, more just to fill the space a little bit and make sure that kind of, people know what the tempo is going to be and just keep it a bit more interesting and rolling along. So I like to end the intro in a kind of like long reverse to really lead into the next section. So on this bit, I used the choir vox that I was telling you about earlier, pitched it down a whole octave, and then reversed it. So you end up with this really long sort of tail at the end that leads into the next full section. So the main reverb that I use for all of these kind of intro effects is the Sound Toys little plate. and I've basically just put that all the way wet, fairly long tail, and then I'll put that on some bits and not on others. So basically one of these channels or a few of these channels will have different length reverbs on them, and then as I'm going through the intro I'll just drop the clips in each channel to see which one works. So some of them are completely reverbless, some of them have got a little bit, some of them have got loads like this one, and yeah, I'll just move around the pieces of audio until they sit in the bits that I want and it sounds good. So the next section we'll get into is kind of the first drop, I guess. So for this one, I've taken out all of the kind of weird effects of the intro and just really honed in on that one choir sound, but put it a little bit lower in the mix. And that just repeats and repeats. I've stuck one of the reverse clips here. Other than that, we go into the full drums, bass line, and an ARP as well. So if I go through the drums quickly, they sound like this. So there's no kick drum in there. I like to take all of the drums that aren't kicks and put them in a group together. I then compress them a little bit using the Waves CLA compressor. I do a bit of EQ with the Sheps, which I think is Waves as well. Basically just boosting the highs slightly, taking out a little bit of the lows, and just driving up the output a little bit as well. In terms of what's in, also I like to sidechain all of those drums to the kick. Not loads, but just a little bit. So every time the kick happens, the drums dip slightly, which gives them a bit more movement. And also it kind of knocks the frequencies out of the way. I tend to sidechain stuff rather than cutting anything with the EQs. So I'll cut a little bit of the bass, but not loads. And I'll use the compressor to make it move out of the way of the kick instead. That way you keep all of the kind of low end warmth on your drums. And I'll do that with every other element as well. I try not to cut the lows out of anything if I can help it, basically. So within the drums, we've got a few breaks that I sampled. This one's actually from a sample pack, I think, by a guy called The Count. They're really amazing drum samples, live breaks that he records. I'd highly recommend that. This one I think I sampled from a record. Another one from a record here. So these have been chopped up and rearranged and replayed together. Other than that, I used, again from the same guy, The Count, all of his samples, they have single hits as well. So I've got these set up on drum racks. So all of my drum rack instruments are here. You can see there's quite a lot of different instruments in there. Some of them are just sets of drums I've sampled, some from sample packs, some of them are vocals I've sampled, just loads of different things, but they're always ready to go. So every time I start a track, I know that I can click any of these I want and just get started. I tend to use probably 4 or 5 different sets of drums and no more, and I've been using the same ones since I was about 15, which sounds lazy, and it kind of is, but also it means that your sound's instantly recognizable because you're using a lot of the same elements in a subtle way every time, and people might not think they notice, but they do. So part of getting a kind of signature sound is just repeating the same sounds in a non-obvious way. So maybe a little thing like the same hi-hat every time, or maybe you layer the same clap subtly every time. These things don't go unnoticed, and I think they really help. So I've got these set up on a drum rack, which I then play in on the MIDI keyboard. So I can just layer my own playing over the top of the breaks. So for instance on this, I've just got a simple ride there. Got some ghost notes. So this part's all programmed in the MIDI, whereas the rest is audio. I like to use a mix of both. And then I've got the kicks down here. Just a really simple, basic kick. And like I say, all of the other drums are sidechained a little bit to this. So if we listen to them all together, it sounds like this. So the kick's just one of, I think it's in my kicks instrument. And yeah, these are really old, so I'm always using one of these kicks basically. And they're just from a sample pack, I think, that I must have got years and years ago. So also in this bit, we've got the bass line comes in. For this, I basically use Keyscape, which is, it's actually a piano plugin, but if you open it up, the first patch you get is a bass patch. So if you open up Keyscape and don't click any of the presets, you just get a pure sub sound. So on the bass line, I basically just chose the notes that followed the chord progression that was in the piano stem. Didn't want to mess around with it too much. It worked perfectly, so I just came up with something that sat nicely underneath that. Didn't rock the boat too much, basically. So the next thing I put in was this ARP. This is played on the Arturia Fairfisser plugin, which is amazing. I've only got the demo version, so basically you get 20 minutes worth of usage and then it starts making a really horrible noise and you have to stop using it. And I figured instead of buying it, I'm going to keep it in the demo version because it means I have to make really quick decisions about what I play. So I'll play in the ARP quite quickly, have to bounce it. If I want to do a slightly different version, I have to bounce it again, and it all has to happen within those 20 minutes. So it basically means that I can't mess around too much. And I found that's quite a useful tool. I do that with quite a lot of different software. Instead of buying it, I just use the demo, so you have that limitation in place, like a forced limitation that you can't get out of, which means you can just cycle through ideas really quickly, and I find it quite helpful. Yeah, so the limitations that are set, other than this kind of synth demo trick, would be, yeah, to try and use the same set of drums quite often, or maybe I'll give myself like a day on a project. I probably wouldn't spend more than a week on anything. I tend to find that if I haven't done the bulk of the track within 2 or 3 hours, then there's not much point for me to carry on, and I'll just start another one the next day instead of going back to that one. There's some exceptions to that, but generally I think you should just be working super quick. Don't be tied to any ideas. Cut stuff as much as possible. Just try and not be attached to anything you're doing in terms of individual ideas. So if a bass line's not working, don't force it, just get rid of it and do another one. Yeah, so everything should be happening quite quickly at all times for me. Once I've moved on from stuff, so if I've got rid of a certain bass line or I've got rid of a whole project or whatever, I won't look at it again. That's gone forever. So for the ARP, I just used the plugin, the Fairfisser plugin, stuck quite a long reverb on there, again from the little plate, the Soundtoys little plate, and then just played a really simple melody. Nice and simple, again just using the same notes that kind of followed the piano chords, and yeah, that's the ARP. So the next thing I did was layer up the ARP with the exact same thing, but an octave higher, just to kind of expand the sound a little bit. So that sounds like this. Slightly faster arpeggiator than the other one. So double the speed and double the pitch basically, and then when you layer them together, they sound a bit more interesting. Pretty messy, but it works with all the other stuff, so I didn't bother EQing much at all, if anything. In fact, nothing. I just sidechained it to the kick. There's no EQ whatsoever, so I kind of kept all the kind of dirty artifacts in there. And I also introduced another part of the original stems, which is the lead vocal, which sounds like this. So this one has a massive reverb on there. This other one I think doesn't. Yes. So you layer up those two together. Again, similar to the idea with the arps, just having two slightly different versions of the same thing layered on top gives it a really nice sound. So this is all basically leading up to the big moment, which is the piano from the original song. Just an insanely catchy piano melody from the original Model Man track. So for me, this is kind of the focus point of the track. So everything before that was trying to keep it interesting to lead up to this this kind of drop, and we just go straight in with the whole chords. You can see I've kind of cut the audio on these because the chords in the original track are a bit off kilter. So if I can find them here. You can kind of hear there's a bit of swing to them. So each chord is kind of late. It doesn't have a sort of regular beat. So whilst that sounds amazing in the original, I wanted this remix to be a bit more straight up for the dance floor. So I basically just cut the audio to kind of bring everything into a bit more of a solid point. Yeah, just to make it a little bit easier to fit around the beat and to make sure that it had that driving factor. So I also put this massive 808 underneath because I've just been a bit obsessed with 808s for a little while now. This is using the Simpler plugin, which is built into Ableton, and basically just dragged an 808 sample from, I think it was like a trap sample pack or something like that, which there's millions of on the internet. So you can find a good 808 pretty easily these days. So you drag it into the Simpler, have it on one-shot mode. I took a lot of the high frequencies out because I wanted it to be a kind of deep sub bass. And that's basically it really. And then I just played another bass line on that. So I just played that in on the keyboard, and there we have that. Again, just follows the chords, just like the other bass line. There's no point where I have all bass lines happening at the same time, so we've basically either got the big 808 happening, or we have the sort of longer legato sub going, because if you have them at the same time, it's just too much, basically. So it's kind of two distinct bassline sections. So yeah, in this breakdown, I basically comes in with the piano chords, the 808 comes underneath, the drums from the intro come back, the arps come back, and then I also bring in this 303 acid line to really elevate everything. So for this one I used the Roland Virtual 303. So Roland do like a subscription service. I think you pay monthly, you get to use any of the plugins. So I used that, and there's basically two layers. So one of them's a straight version with not much automation or effects. And the other one I recorded a longer take, messing around with different reverb settings and EQ settings and settings on the 303 itself. Also messing with the resonance and stuff like that, so this is kind of the more wild of the two. After the breakdown, we drop back into a kind of more simplified version where there's no piano. We just go in with the choir sounds, the lead vocal, and just a kind of stripped back drop with the 303 and the bass line. Still with the 808 bass line at this point. Some of the sounds back in from the intro, just the lower mixed choir sample, and then this reverse section there. And then we basically build it up for a few bars, and then we come back in with the full piano. The 808 comes out, and we go back to the original bass line and just sort of see it home from there. Then we come into a section stripped down again, so kind of just focusing on the 808 and the drums, with the arps in there as well. This is sort of like an outro. So for that bit, I really just wanted to showcase how the drums sounded with the 808, because I think the combination just sounds really, really good. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that there was a little bit where it was just those two together, so nothing got lost. Then for the final section, I basically repeat the intro. So you can see here, this is just the same as it was at the beginning, but kind of played in reverse. So instead of it fading in and lots of stuff coming in and happening, on the outro, the stuff's being faded out. Some of the reverse bits have then been put forward. I've changed some of the pitching on different things. So it's essentially a mirrored version of the intro, and that's the outro. And that is how I made my remix of Model Man's Take Me There.